Welcome to episode 16 of Primary Target. Today's a very exciting day. Lots of big changes happening in EVE Online. We have with us, as always, my co-host Vargren and our returning guest Laura Secco from Hard Knocks. We're going to talk about as many of the things today as we can that have changed and that are changing and that we know about and that we even don't know about. So let's dive right in. So sort of the big sort of news, I guess. One of the big things is that there is now a new region of space in EVE Online. And one of you stop me if I'm saying this incorrectly. But it appears that there are 3 systems that once were high-sec systems. I believe one of them is the Yarja, and I do not actually know what the names of the other 2 are. But those 3 systems have now been cut off from the rest of high-sec and have now been linked to each other in a 3-system region called
Pochgven. I don't know how to pronounce it. It is 27 systems. It is not 3 systems.
Oh, it's 27 systems.
It's 27 high-sec
it's like a
systems.
huge triangle.
Okay.
There's 3 constellations of 9 systems connected together in a triangle.
3 constellations. That's my bad then. Right.
They've literally cut a triangle out of the map.
Yeah. So that's big news. And we don't know if this is going to be reversed. Like, for all we know, this is going to be permanently.
Might be permanent, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to assume that it's permanent. You know, the last time I was on this show, I seem to remember saying to you guys, what if there was a Thera, but it was a constellation and a group of systems linked together by Stargates that was only accessible. And I also vaguely remember saying that the invasion content would be a good opportunity to introduce something new like that. So I'm feeling okay about that. What I didn't realize is that a part of the course with CCP, there is a catch, which is, well, let's go through what the. I won't start crying straight away.
I was going to say, yeah, we're starting in the middle.
The specific changes, and I do want to say there's a lot of good things to say about these changes because the concept is really good, and there's definitely people out there with different requirements of playing EVE that I do that should be excited about these changes. So to start with, the 27 systems, they're a mix of high-sec and low-sec systems, and they're accessible from other areas of space via wormholes. We're pretty sure that the previous low-sec to low-sec wormholes still connect to the low-sec Triglavian systems. So systems like Ravaros are still connected to low-sec by normal wormholes. And there's also new specific wormholes connecting these systems to other areas of space. If you are lucky or unlucky enough to be connected to one of these systems, Triglavian roaming gangs will spawn in your case space. So if your wormhole is connected to one of these new systems in the new region, you'll get roaming gangs of Triglavian in your wormhole. We've already seen a few.
Wow.
Yeah. We've seen a few Triglavian gangs wandering around. We've also seen new sleeper and drifter rats wandering around. As a PSA there, a lot of these rats are new. Already had a report of somebody complaining that they were getting killed by an invisible enemy because it wasn't on their overview. So make sure everyone, if you're listening and you haven't already, make sure you update your overview and get all like the new sleeper entities and the drifter entities on there.
Yeah, so
one
of our other former guests today, Tragilar Gimbatal, was in Minmatar High-Sec in like a 0.9 system and was killed by drifters rather. He just like targeted them and they went straight for him and murdered his Varger.
Yeah, this is one of the bad bits, unfortunately. The rats camping high-sec and making it even more dangerous than it was, which I feel sorry for any of the new players if one of these wormholes spawns on the Sisters of Eve Epic Arc route. For the record, there's a bunch of systems that the Triglavians conquered that are called minor victory systems that aren't involved in these 27 systems that have been taken out of EVE. And these systems not only are they still in New Eden, but the little triangle in the autopilot has been removed. So you can't tell if you're moving through invaded systems anymore, and you will just die to gate camps.
And on top of that, the autopilot routing system will not tell you if the system that you're going through has a gate that's actually functional either. So it may route you somewhere and the gate be non-functional, and you're just sitting there at a gate that's dead.
The gate's not functioning a bug. So to clarify, there's two gates that are sort of different to how they were yesterday. The first gate is the gates that used to lead to what is now Triglavian space, or give it a fancy name like T space instead of like J space or whatever. The gates leading to T space, they're gone forever, and autopilot has updated. So if you plot a route from Amar to Jita, for example, Niaja is no longer an option, no matter what settings you have.
Because that gate no longer exists.
Do the gates actually still exist in space? Are they just like I haven't visited one of these systems. Are they just the model just sitting there? Like, can you?
Yeah, they seem to have been turned into large collidable objects. There's some fancy animations of like the ruined Stargate. I'd go and take a look. It's a bit of a spectacle.
Yeah, I'll go check it out.
And it's also worth mentioning that there are still some gates unrelated to the new T space that are being disabled. I was traveling through Duans in Essence earlier today, for example, and some of the gates leading in and out of that system were disabled. I've brought that up with the CSM, and it seems that that is a bug left over from the event that happened yesterday. So there shouldn't be any temporarily disabled gates in high-sec or low-sec anymore. It should just be that the gates leading to the new Triglavian systems no longer work and will not be coming back. So it seems there's a bit of unintended stuff that will hopefully be hotfixed in the future.
And it's really just trying to like sort the bugs from the features at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the main bug. It is worth mentioning. Sorry, go ahead.
For anyone who doesn't know, yesterday, the 12th of October, CCP, the game experienced outages of Stargates in random places in all of known space.
Should we say seemingly random?
Seemingly random, sure. Where the gates would just shut off. Sometimes it would be an entire system that would be isolated and cut off. Sometimes it would just be one gate from one system to the other. And there was a stream up for this. And there was one person who posted several times about a paragraph. And I'm going to read it real quick because part of what he said came true. It comes from Frosty McMuggins, and it says, there is an embedded countdown in the pulse of the gates that suggests in 10 hours or so, the Trig system gates may all go offline permanently, and this may cause the whole gate system to temporarily go down while Concord redirects the gate signals to get them back up again. This may cause local chat to become not available as well, since that information runs through the gate system. Be careful and very vigilant. Part of what he said was true. There was apparently an embedded code in the pulses of the gates. And also, what we've now seen is that the Trig system gates have gone offline, seemingly permanently. And they've now had to redirect Stargates to other systems, or the route has redirected us to other systems to continue normal travel.
It's worth saying that there is no local in the new Triglavian region as well. So there's the local interference.
Ooh.
Actually, that's a question I have, which is how are the Triglavian systems behaving? Is it essentially nullsec in there now? Like,
it's the sec status is nullsec, which means no security status losses. There don't seem to be signers allowed, but some of the systems were formerly low-sec, so there are caps in there, and there seem to be extra large wormholes leading to and from those systems, the N944 wormholes that were traditionally low-sec to low-sec, and I assume you can still bring caps through them. As far as moving caps through the Stargate network within the region, we don't know yet. Local is wormhole local. Here's a question I want to know. What's the asset safety like? Is there asset safety? Because there's a bunch of, like, I know there's the Test Alliance fort in Ravaros. I know there's a bunch of structures in Niaja.
I mean, there's got to be a bunch of people with just stuff in NPC stations in those systems who are just going to log on and be like, now what? Like, how do you get all your stuff out?
Oh, CCP's been spamming us with these evac notifications. And also, it's not just wormholes to get in and out of this region. It is also a selection of Triglavian filaments. There's been 4 new filaments added to the game, 2 inbound and 2 outbound.
Okay.
The inbound filaments, they will take you from any system in known space. It says specifically, so I assume they don't work in wormhole space.
Non-wormholes, all right.
It takes you from any system in known space to So I don't know what this means. One of them says that it takes you to a system in the cray of Triglavian space, which I assume is just represents an area of some of the 27 systems.
Yeah.
And then the second filament will take you to a system in Triglavian space of the designated system class border, internal, or home. So I don't know what cray is, and I don't know what border, internal, or home means. But I assume they're different. I assume they're different classifications of systems in this new area of space. So you've got these two types of filaments that will take you in.
How's it
And
spelled?
the two outbound filaments, these two are very interesting. The first one will take you from Triglavian space to a random k-space system that is a Triglavian minor victory system. So somewhere in high-sec or low-sec, anyone at random.
Okay.
Which is interesting. And the second type of outbound filament will take you from T-space to a nearby star system in known space. So for reference, the systems haven't physically moved in space. The coordinates are the same. It's just the gate connections have disabled. So you could, for example, activate one of these filaments in Niaja and end up in Madame, for example. So those seem to be the main ways of getting in and out, and those are the ways I imagine most people will be traveling, because scanning wormhole chains is kind of a pain. But it outlines sort of the good part about this change, which is this is a very unique place of living. It's somewhere for the yeet filament people to live, because you can use one of these filaments to leave and then go and roam, and then you can use a traditional nullsec yeet filament, like one of the normal ones that's already been on TQ. You can use one of them to go and explore, and then you can use one of these inbound filaments to be teleported back to T-space where you live. So yeet filament people now have a route back, which is that's very interesting. It reduces the time to content. It increases convenience for the sort of people who are using the filaments to roam around. And I 100% see corporations springing up overnight that are going to be living in these areas of space. It would not surprise me if there was already a corporation on TQ so soon that has decided that they're a trigger corporation and is going to move into these regions. That would not surprise me at all. Yeah. It's looking like a very exciting new gameplay style that is not wormhole space, is not nullsec, is not even really comparable to Thera. It's an entirely new thing based around random roaming using filaments, and that's quite exciting. It's taken a feature that a lot of people like and made it into what can only be described as a viable playstyle, like a properly playstyle that can only really be used by smallish corporations, like the sort of corps that put 5 to 25 people on field at a time.
So
that's an excellent point. Honestly, I hadn't actually considered it. Like, I didn't know about the new filaments. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. So if you wanted to live in one of this new Triglavian system region systems, I assume, do you need some kind of reputation with the Triglavians so that you're not getting shot?
And now we get on to the bad bit. So for reference, there's a bunch of different NPCs that roam around this area of space. Triglavian live there, there's some Edencom there, and there's also roaming Drifter, Sleeper, and Rogue Drone gangs that live in this area. I was watching Bjorn B's stream earlier, and he was sat on one of these new stargates killing a Rogue Drone supercarrier.
Okay.
So there are some new NPCs. There's a screenshot going around of a dude sat in Nalvula, which is one of the low-sec trig systems, killing a Rogue Drone supercarrier with a Fortizar. So they're whopping around structures as well.
Rogue Drone supercarrier.
Yeah, I'll link you the image in a sec, because the model is really cool. Like, the art team win this patch once again.
What?
I think that's like the mainstay thing of all of the patches of the last 5 years is that the art team have been the standout winner as far as new content goes. They've blown it out of the park again with these new models.
Honestly, that's hard to argue with. Yeah, there are some just really gorgeous models right now.
It's thinking back on how bitter I've been about changes, and then thinking about the art changes, and I think there is one ship redesign in the last 5 years that I'm not 100% happy with. I'm not a big fan of the new Incursors. And besides that, I love everything. So like that's pretty good considering how pessimistic I am about the rest of the changes.
So real quick, I looked up two words that we've talked about so far today. Number one was Pochvin, which is the new region of Triglavian space. Pochvin in Bulgarian means soil. In Russian, I think it means something similar to grassroots. Kray, spelled Kray, I'm not sure if that's the way it's spelled in the game.
Yes, that
Kray it has three different definitions as a noun. In Russian, it looks like it means region. In or it means edge, or it means end. So that's. It seems like these names are being like taken from either Russian or Bulgarian.
Cyrillic languages.
Yeah, Cyrillic
I have no idea. So if you imagine a constellation, one of these constellations in the new region is 9 systems. They form a triangle of 3 systems, and then there's 2 arms of 3 systems reaching out from 2 of the corners of the triangle, one going to each of the other 2 constellations. So it's a triangle with 2 little arms. And if you were to ask me, I would assume that the arms were sort of the border, and then the triangle was a mixture of the internal or the home systems, which is sort of the areas of space that the Potchkin filament, I'm going to butcher that name every time I say it, but that type of filament will take you to there. I'm wondering where Cry fits into that. Maybe the edges of the arms are Cry systems. Maybe Triglavian minor victory systems in known space are these Cry systems. We don't know currently. So we don't actually know where those filaments are going to take us.
God, I love the amount of mystery that's around this at the moment is actually very cool. I think the level of mystery is probably the coolest feature so far.
This is always the best part of a new patch, where you introduce, it's kind of like One More Space, where you introduce this new thing that nobody really understands, and then a small group of players dedicated enough to learn the content, work it out, solve it, master it, and then they have this little niche where they have an expertise advantage over other players engaging in that content. And that's something that's magical about Wormhole Space, and it's going to be the same for this area of space as well, where people are going to learn little quirks of the rat AI, for example, maybe. So all these diamond rat, like you can trick diamond rats in K-Space right now to camp your hostiles into stations, and I imagine there might be some other quirks and tricks in the AI that people are going to learn.
So, yeah, I think that we'll get there at some point, but like, I don't have this experience in the game so far. Whereas like when I started playing the game, most everything about the game was already known. I could Google it and find out, to the one ISK how much a site was going to net me, or I could find out how many HP like the Drifter Response battleship had, and how many points of scram to hold him down with, and what his behaviors are. I could find out that information if I wanted to, because the game's been around so long, and the content within the game has been so regular that everyone's been able to figure it out to a science. But today, all that changed. And there's now new things in the game that we don't know anything about. And much like the way that Elite Dangerous goes, whereas the developers of that game didn't tell anyone how things were going to happen. They didn't tell them, the information about like the, what are they called, Varg?
I forget, I haven't played the game in a while.
The aliens, the ones that have been putting people out of war. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They didn't tell you about them. They just kind of happened. And everyone's like, what's this? And the developers are like, I don't know, figure it out. That's happening now. CCP is being very silent about this, which I kind of like,
It's nice to an extent. I still don't like on-the-day patch notes where something might have broken that somebody would have noticed. For example, the low-sec invasion content where the Zenitras were dropping initially, the shooting the trigs in them was broken, where people were farming tens of billions of ISK an hour from officer mods because the officer mod drops were broken. And that's the sort of thing that happens when you release content onto the servers without allowing players to test it, or without giving us an overview of what the intended behavior is. So it is a trade-off there. It is quite exciting to find this new exciting thing. It is going to be solved in a few weeks to a couple of months, which is why a lot of people were excited for when Abyssal Dead Space was introduced back in 2018, because it looked like sort of new dynamic PvE that wouldn't be solvable. Unfortunately, that wasn't really the case, and the sites are only randomized to an extent, and it was solvable in the end. But introducing that mystery is always exciting. Unfortunately, it's quite a lot of development effort to get that done.
It is, yeah.
It is, while we're talking about we were talking about earlier the requirements of living in this area of space, it is worth saying the main huge downside of this change, which is that to use Stargates in this new area of space, you require +3 standings with Triglavian.
Right, so they weren't lying when they said that the choices you make now in this conflict will have permanent consequences.
Yeah, so Let me sum this up from my perspective as somebody who was quite excited when they heard that this was going to be a thing, and as somebody who's wanted this for a while and like would consider living there. I would want to like explore the area of space with my scouts and like look for wormholes and stuff. I now need to grind +3 standings on my 5 million skill point probing alts and all of my on my DST alts, and even on my main. Like, I was just talking to a buddy of mine in Test Alliance who was involved in the Niaja content. He was fighting for the Triglavians, and he said that after 2 days, like not like fully committed to the cause, not playing for hours every day, but after a couple of days of going on fleets, he was only at like +2-ish standings. So it's a reason. It's like it's a few hours of grinding per character to get +3, and you have to do that if you're the sort of people who do the nano gangs where you have your backpack ults and you have your probing ults and your rolling ults. You're gonna have to do this for all of your characters if you want to move around. As somebody who wants to live there, if I'm thinking about what my day would be like if I lived there, and my day would be like, okay, I want to buy something from Jita, so I need to go to Nalvula with my DST ult, which is the closest system in there to Jita, I believe, and then use one of these nearby filaments to go to Jita, and then use one of the filaments from Jita to get home, and then have to gate, and then land somewhere in the random 27 systems when I use the filament to return, and then have to gate around with my transport ult. So that transport ult then needs to have +3 Triglavian standings, and because the Edencom Fortress system still exists in HiSec, these ults are then going to not really be able to get around traditional HiSec anymore because of all the Edencom all over the place. So it's GCP are forcing players to choose, and it's an irreversible choice, really. Like you could grind the standings back in the other direction, but it's a lot of effort.
Yeah.
So this is what I really don't like about it, because the sort of people who are going to live in these areas of space are the sort of people who are already moving around HiSec just for logistics or for travel. Like Wormhole Corps, for example, spend a lot of time in HiSec just moving in between wormhole chains.
Yeah. But would you want the barrier to entry to be so easy as well? Like,
yes, look at Thera. It's like on a meta level, the content in Thera was a success. It spawned a whole new way of finding content. Little ecosystems popped up in there. There was a bit of excitement when it first came out about Wingspan trying to evict someone from Thera or something. I can't remember the story, but it was just a bunch of drama that was caused by the content. On a meta level, I really believe it succeeded. And the barrier for entry was launching combat probes, which for a lot of people is enough of a barrier of entry to keep them out. And not to mention, when you warp to these wormholes in the new area of space, you land 80 kilometers off them like you do with the drifter wormholes.
yeah.
So there's already a bit of danger burning around. And then there's, even if you have plus Triglavian standings, there's rats burning around, Edencom, Drifter, Sleeper, that you're going to be hostile to, even if you're friendly with the Triglavians. So there's always going to be that danger, and even if you lower the barrier of entry to 0.
I don't know. I kind of think if you're going to live in a place where it's going to be more difficult to live, and you're going to live in a place where things are new and exciting, I don't know. I don't think that it's such a bad thing to have a little bit more of a barrier to entry than normal. You know, like there's a
difference between. So wormhole space has a barrier of entry because of the knowledge and because of the time it takes to scan things around, right? Like you need to move ults around, logistics, etc., etc. This has more of a barrier for entry because every single time I want to bring a new ult into this area of space, say if I sub a new DST ult or if I sub a new PvP ult, I then need to run around PvPing for 4 or 5 hours to get the standings up, and it might be more than 4 or 5 hours. We don't actually know how much, because it's not the same as grinding pirate faction standings, because you can't do epic arcs, and there are no storyline agents that you can just hand in gas to for the standings boosts like there are for the Blood Raiders or for the Guristas or whoever. This is go out, grind NPCs, kill one NPC, wait 5 minutes for the standings tick, kill another NPC, wait 5 minutes for the standings tick. Like, it's that sort of monotonous 2003 era gameplay.
Oh, you know, that was actually going to be a question of mine, which was how theoretically would I get my Triglavian rep up?
You would go to this new area of Triglavian space, or you would go to the Edencom's fortresses and you would kill Edencom rats. I've also been told that killing sleepers and drifters in T-space will give you positive standings for both Edencom and Triglavian. Take that with a pinch of salt, because that's not confirmed. I've just been told that.
Interesting.
But so worth testing if anybody's living there.
I'm looking right now at a Reddit post of someone who's taken a picture of the old HiSec gate in Niaja, and it is destroyed.
Yeah. As far as lore is concerned, the gates were physically destroyed by Concord. Like, they landed Marines on the gates to run around and destroy the reactors in order to preserve the integrity of the rest of the jump gate network. That is the story.
And from my understanding, there is a giant structure in Niarza right now. I've only seen pictures of it. And it looks, I guess,
so cool.
Similar to a world arc, but apparently it's much larger. It has gates. Apparently the gates, when you try to warp to them, they look like the triangle gates that you would see in Abyssal Dead Space, right? The exit gates. And apparently if you try to warp to one, it lands you 400 kilometers off, and you have to burn straight to the gate to get to it. You have to burn 400 kilometers.
Those are the gates that you use to travel between the T-space systems. Those are the new stargates in that region, the triangles.
I see.
400 kilometers, Jesus. I don't think that's true, because I was watching Beyond Stream. I was watching Beyond Stream and I saw people land at 0 on the gate that were warping in. So I'm not sure if that's true. It might be true for the wormholes, because I've been told that when you warp to the new wormholes, it's kind of like the drifter wormholes, where there's a bunch of large collidable objects there and there's some pretty scenery and some rats, and it lands you like 80 kilometers off on a beacon. But so these filaments that we talked about, as far as where you get them from, I know some of them are actually for sale in the stations from Triglavian NPCs, but I have been told that some of them are only obtainable by killing Triglavians and looting their wrecks, which, if true, seems counterintuitive, because if you want these filaments, then by definition you live in this area of space and therefore want positive Triglavian standing just to be able to move around. So you're going to need specific ults to farm these filaments, if this is true, and if you can't buy them all from these agents. But that seems very counterintuitive, and it feels like CCP have not really thought out the implications of throwing standings into this feature as a mechanic, because
this
standings
is what makes
were already...
so much of this. It's what makes so much of this hard to judge, is because it's very hard to tell at this point if there is some plan behind all of these changes, or if, as we have seen in the past, not all of the ramifications of some of these changes have been properly gamed out by CCP before deploying it.
I think a lot of the time CCP just say something that sounds good and then put it out there without really thinking about the implications. If we think about the new Edencom ships, for example, CCP wanted a ship that was the opposite of Triglavians. So they went, okay, well, Triglavian does big damage to one target, so let's make a ship that does small damage to lots of targets. And then they just threw it out there, and it was terrible. And it took another balanced iteration to actually put it in a place where it might be seen in 100-man fights. And even then, I've heard that some of the materials just aren't really available on TQ currently, because it was in the invasion content that doesn't exist anymore, or it was in the events that don't exist anymore. So I think a lot of the stuff around here hasn't really been thought out. But to be fair, when was the last time CCP did sort of a major anything to do with lore or new NPCs being added or anything along these lines? It's been a while. I think the last time may have been Wormholes in 2009. Like the last time they added like a major new way of making money.
The thing is, I'm always on the fence about this, because there are reasons to play Eve, which I think are excellent. Is essentially the player generated history of the game, where Eve is like a framework for all of this stuff that we know on a daily basis to happen. All of the kind of the betrayals and the triumphs and the last stands, all of this kind of crazy stuff is built in this fantastic kind of open framework, and we're just allowed to kind of do what we want, and what happens. And it's like, if nullsec turns into a huge blue blob, that's fucking how humans behave. That's what you got to expect. Small gang roaming changes because of, you know, a new ship being introduced or whatever. It's like, this is kind of what happens in the framework. Whereas this kind of change, like you say, is a big kind of like lore story kind of thing, which also has kind of very large ramifications on the framework that is EVE Online. Like this big triangle being cut out, all of these new standings coming in, and especially the standings thing kind of bothers me a little bit, just because it's kind of, it has an echo of other MMOs in that, like, making you grind standings to do certain things, which I've always enjoyed the fact that Eve was very free of that. that end of things. So I'm wondering like to what extent we should expect this to kind of be like a gameplay mechanic going forward, and is this something that we actually want to see in Eve?
Yeah, I've got to say, if CCP end up listening to this, like, I am quite a pessimistic person when it comes to changes, especially ones that affect wormhole space. My 80% of my pessimism from this change comes from the standings, issue, needing +3 to even interact with this content in the first place, which is ironic considering the role players and lore masters that would be interested in this in the first place have mostly sided with Edencom, so they can't even engage in the content themselves.
I wonder if what will happen is that the barrier now is +3 standings with Trigs. And what will happen is that over time, the Triglavian overlords that own the region will then lower the threshold once the what they would probably refer to as like the true Kybernauts, like the true faithful, who have stood by them and gained those kind of standings. Once they've had a chance to move in and get established, if then they'll say, okay, the chosen have been able to enter our region, now we will let you lesser, those of you who are lesser, to enter. You know what I mean?
I think it's likely that they might do something and frame it in that way. What's actually going to happen in reality, and this is my prediction for this content, it's going to have really low retention, and people are not going to be really interested in engaging in it because of limits like this after like the first few days go past. CCP is going to ask CSM why. CSM is going to say the standings thing is terrible, and then CCP will remove or reduce the standings limit, hopefully remove it. I think that's my prediction. I think it's going to be really poor retention after the first few days after Bjorn stops streaming it. And then CCP are going to go to CSM for help, and hopefully they'll listen to the CSM.
Yeah, because this is certainly something that, like, I would love to just hop in there and have a bit of a fly around. But, like, I mean, I have no standings with anybody. I don't really do much of the kind of the high-sec lore-related stuff. I pretty much just shoot people.
Yeah, so you could get yourself a filament and go in, but you'd be limited to just whatever system you ended up in. So you'd be able to have a look around for the content. But if, for example, you were like, okay, I've seen a border system now, and I want to see a home system. If my guesses are correct, there's only 3 home systems in the entire region, so it's like a 1 in 9 chance of finding one if you use a filament.
Yeah.
So that's content you won't be able to engage in without standings. Another big disadvantage that I want to talk about is the fact that when wormholes leading to Trig space spawn elsewhere, Trig roaming fleets also spawn there, which means that I'm going to give you a scenario here. So, for example, say I live in a high class wormhole and I'm pro Triglavian, and one of these wormholes spawns, and I'm sat in a wormhole anonymy running sites in a dreadnought or whatever, and these sites spawn, and then the Triglavian rats warp in on me, and maybe one of the ults that I'm using to rat isn't pro Triglavian and it's just neutral. So then the Triglavians shoot that ult, and then I have to defend that ult with the ones that are pro Triglavian, tank my standings, and then I'm not pro Triglavian anymore. There's so many different ways that it could go wrong because of a combination of the standings and forcing players to PvE. I think you were onto something earlier, Varg, when you were talking about how changing the framework of Eve is a little bit. It's a little bit weird.
It's a dangerous game. Yeah.
It makes the PvE the main character in the story. CCP need to make changes where the players are the main character, which for the most part they've done. A lot of the big wars that you've heard about happened because of CCP changes. So the Fountain War in 2013 happened because of the moon redistributions, making Fountain a really valuable region. A lot of the conflict that's been happening in the East over the last 3 years happened because of the faction Fortizar conversion. Those sorts of things were enabled by CCP. And then there's, of course, the rich history of wormhole space that happened because CCP took a risk with a new area of space and a new type of NPC. Akin to what they're doing here, except they didn't gate it by standings. They just said, here's a new area of space. It's complicated as hell. Good luck taking 2 years to solve it.
But certainly when the wormhole region, like when wormhole space was introduced, certainly it wasn't, it had its share of things we were probably, what's the word I'm looking for? Things that we probably didn't like about it when it came out.
See, the barrier for entry back then for a wormhole space wasn't hard mechanics like standings. It was the mechanics of the old scanning system kind of sucked. Thankfully, in 2009, CCP revamped scanning, where before 2009, probes couldn't warp. You would have to warp around a system and drop a probe somewhere and then warp somewhere else and drop another probe to make your formations. And they changed that in 2009 to make the warpable probe formations. But even after that, you would have to manually create a probe formation every time you launched a probe, and it was just a massive pain compared to the post 2013 Odyssey patch probing that we have
nice
today.
now.
Yeah, it's
so
really nice now
comparatively.
And there's still a pretty high skill ceiling with custom probe formations and just being faster probing. Like, it's in quite a good place right now.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the barrier for entry there, and I'm sure there were a lot of things that people were unhappy with.
Yeah, I would
people to this
definitely
day-
make the argue there that the barrier to entry, like, yeah, there was the high skill ceiling on it, but it's literally just like you just train how to put the probes on your ship, and you can be a wormholer. Like, that's all it took. It wasn't a lot of effort. If that kind of a lifestyle appealed to you, you could just go and do it.
It's also worth pointing out.
True. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say it's also worth pointing out the difference between the complaints. So in 2009, people would complain that they don't like wormholes because it gives players routes to come in and kill them that they didn't have previously. And I'm saying now that I don't like these new changes in 2020 because it gives NPCs routes into my wormholes to kill me that they didn't have previously. The big difference between them is the PvP aspect. Back in 2009, these case-based dudes have the avenues to enact revenge on the people coming to kill them. I don't want to enact revenge on NPCs. I want a PvP. I don't want to be forced into this PvE content. I don't want to have to log into a wormhole and think, oh, I can't really do anything today because Triglavians will kill my rolling ships. They'll kill my PvE ships. So I need to clear my wormhole of Triglavians first. And what I will probably do instead is just log off and hope they disappear. Because I don't know.
Again, you don't want to tank your standings with the Triglavians either.
Yeah,
it seems
I really
like you're
don't.
going to need this kind of rep at this point. So,
and
yeah,
thank goodness
it's a weird one.
If they attacked structures, it'd be awful. As far as I know, they don't attack structures. I don't know whether that is to do with corporation standings to Triglavians or not, but I've had multiple reports of them in wormhole space, and I've not yet had reports of any of them shooting at citadels. So I can, if they ever start shooting at citadels, and you as a pro Triglavian player are forced to defend your citadel from one of these roaming gangs, I just hope they never shoot.
Very awkward situation, yeah.
But I'm already in that situation, just even if they don't shoot the citadels, because I need to defend my system, because not all of the people living in my system are going to be pro-trig. And it just puts players in really awkward situations caused by terrible, outdated standings mechanics that really shouldn't be in the game in the first place. There's got to be better ways of implementing missions than this standing. Like there must be some sort of reputation mechanic that you can implement to do with
because
agents.
As you said before, it just goes back to you're doing this kill one ship, wait 5 minutes for the rep tick, and then just literally repeat that until you've got the standing.
And to my knowledge, that's why CCP added the standings tags in 2013 that allowed you to buy security status back, because doing this, go to a nullsec belt, kill a battleship, wait 5 minutes, kill another battleship, it's monotonous and people didn't want to do it. But if they didn't do it, then they'd be locked out of HiSec. So CCP throw in these tags, and the world is in balance again, and people can run around in low secers if they want to move back to HiSec, can get their security status back without having to go to nullsec for how many hours of grinding.
I've literally done it myself, yeah.
Yeah, it feels to me like CCP have unlearned this lesson. I'm really confused as to why they've put the standings gates. When I first heard this, it came out I believe it came out in the scraping yesterday. There was going to be some standings limitations. When I first heard this, I had the same reaction to when somebody mistakenly said that the Alliance tournament was going to be on Thunderdome a few years ago. I just went, no, like this is not true, because CCP wouldn't do this, because they've learned this lesson. They wouldn't host the Alliance tournament on Thunderdome because it ruins the point of the Alliance tournament. They wouldn't add standing implementation to new content because standing is a 2003. Like, imagine if new content was gated behind attributes somehow. Like you had to have over 20 intelligence to enter a new site. Like, it's just,
yeah.
For me, it's on par with that.
Yeah, it's not taking us in what I don't know. All right, tell you what, let's go for the wild speculation section of the chat. So they've got their big triangular systems. It's cut off. It's only really accessible via wormholes or by these filament. Let's game this out. Like, does those systems eventually have a population of Triglavian-friendly players in there who exist? Is mostly for the PvP, but there's some element of PvE that goes on in there. There's some kind of resource generation. Is there like eventually going to be a market run in there?
Absolutely. I wholly expect a chunk of the current C2 nulltech static community and groups that previously were in Thera to move into these areas to require new members to grind Triglavian standings and to go and live in there. I really do expect like a sort of a wormhole-esque ecosystem where there are groups that are frenemies and fight against, like usually fight against each other, and then when an outsider comes in and starts exploring their space, they'll team up and fight whatever hostile fleet has come in. I really do think that's going to happen.
Do you think the new wormhole types that lead strictly to Triglavian space, do you think those wormhole types will follow the liminal storms around New Eden and pop out a wormhole from Triglavian space to nullsec or wherever the liminal storm is, so that when you pop out that wormhole, you're in a space that has one of those penalty/bonus storms?
I don't know, because
that would be interesting.
So there's five new wormhole types, and we know for a fact that 2 of them leads to wormhole space. We know that the R081 leads to C4, and I know that one leads to C6 because I've heard our C6 owners talk about new wormholes in their space. So I don't know how many of these new wormholes even lead to K-space, because so far 2 of the 5 lead to wormholes. It might be that they all lead to wormholes. We don't know.
Yeah. So what were we talking about earlier? So they're marked as extra large wormholes, but capitals cannot take them.
Yeah. So CCP seem to have some metadata in the code where if a wormhole allows a ship over X mass to jump it, it's marked as very large. In this case, the wormhole allows ships of 450 million kilograms to jump, which is less than half the weight of a capital ship. For reference, a Rorqual is one of the smaller capital ships, and it's 800 million. So we're looking at like sort of blops size, sort of plated blop ships that couldn't previously travel through large wormholes in C4 space, sort of the rolling Higgs blop ships that people used to use.
Yeah, you're going to be able to use like Widows for that, right?
Yeah, you can't use them anymore because of recent changes that I shouldn't go into because we'll be here all day. But you will be able to use them in these wormholes. The extra large doesn't mean capital capable. So, for example, there is actually extra large connections to Thera, but of course, as we all know, you can't take caps in and out of Thera.
Right.
So that it's kind of a non-news. Unfortunately, it's just CCP metadata being created by somebody who doesn't fully understand the designation of large and extra large.
Is there any extra intrinsic value now added to these Triglavian systems in the triangle? Like, I'm assuming that they have come with all of the moons and the belts and all the rest of the stuff that they would have been in there previously, right?
There's a lot of
go on.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues to go there for money. For starters, these filaments, as far as I know, are only available from these Triglavian, either by purchase through Triglavian stations or dropped from Triglavian NPCs as loot. There's new Triglavian ore, which, considering the recent ore rebalance, some of those have high tritanium values, so there's going to be some quite valuable ore in there for miners. The invasion content, obviously, Triglavian invasions aren't happening anymore, so all of the invasion content of Eden versus Trig is exclusively in these systems, and that includes the low-sec Zenitra sites, where you get the parts for Zenitra dreadnoughts, which after the recent buff, I assume people actually want to fly those things. I don't really know. I've not been looking at them.
Yeah, no clue.
I did see some screenshots, actually, of Zenitra blueprints available in an LP store. Yeah, you were about to say that.
Yeah, I was. Which is very interesting, because that means you would then grind LP, or you would exchange, I guess you could exchange Concord LP maybe for that, because Concord LP is like almost universal, right?
It looks like it's purely an ISK cost and not an LP cost from the screenshots I've seen, because there's no Trig LP, and of course using Concord LP to buy a Trig ship doesn't make sense.
Would lure people crazy.
Right.
I mean, if it's just an ISK cost, then I'd assume that it was linked to your ability to just dock in the station or whatever it is, or wherever it is you have to buy it. So again, linked to Triglavian rep, probably.
I don't know if you need rep to dock in the NPC stations. I know about Stargates. I don't know about stations. I will ask about stations. But the price that I saw was 1 billion ISK for a Zenitra blueprint. That was in the screenshot that I saw. And that, of course, doesn't include the however many billions in mineral costs. I think it's something like 10 billion ISK in materials.
That's likely going to, because the price for a Zenitra blueprint right now is more than that.
I would guess. Yeah, I would
I've
guess.
seen them go for 6 and 7 before. I'm not sure what they're actually at right now. I haven't checked.
Yeah, well, they've crashed a little bit, but I definitely feel sorry for the people who spent. I know people who spent hundreds of billions to get the first Nitros on TQ,
Oh Lord, yeah.
and they're feeling a little stupid now, I imagine. But yeah,
It's still cool. Whatever. It's video game money. Be proud of yours, Anitra.
but yeah, there's a bunch of new content. There's probably some new PvE sites that we don't know about yet. There's new roaming gangs because there were not previously Sleeper, Drifter, and Rogue Drone roaming gangs. There's obviously new rat types. The notable one that we've seen is the Rogue Drone Super Carrier. It's a lot of new exciting content that I would love to go and explore, but I run around HiSec a lot on my main just for logistics and for burning between to and from wormhole chains. So I don't want to go and grind the standings because I don't want to be negative to Edencom, because the Edencom fortress systems and the minor Edencom victory systems are still camped by those stupid sentry turrets and all of the big Edencom fleets. And it's just CCP are forcing players to choose between one or the other, or have an army of alts so you can do both. And even if you do choose the pro-Triglavian content, you're going to want an army of alts anyway to farm the Triglavian rats for the filaments. So it's just, I don't think they sat down and made a storyboard of how players would engage in this content. I really think they just went in and like maybe tested the sites and tested the wormholes worked properly and tested the Stargates functioned, but they didn't actually sit down and like, when you design a product in a tech company, you write out a storyboard and like you make up some customer and give them like an age and a profession and whatever, and write out a use case for why they would want to use your product. I think CCP didn't do that for this. They needed
Essentially,
to do
they're
that
not gaming out the human psychology reactions
because
to what they're implementing.
I'm thinking, okay, I want to do, so I live in this area of space. The first thing I want to do is do a logistics run to Jita. So I gate to Nalvula in my DST, which I've had to grind standings for, use one of these filaments, get my Jita run, use one of these filaments back. But to grind these filaments, where did I get them from? I need to shoot Triglavian rats to get the filament, and I don't want to shoot them. But yeah, I've said this, but like, yeah.
There's a weird feedback loop which doesn't seem to be going in the right direction at all. That you have to kind of screw yourself in one way in order to unlock content that you want to play.
Yeah, so if I'm a single boxer, which I imagine is like the designed way to play this game is to single box. I imagine that was their original intention with most of this content, since all of Abyssal Dead Space initially was solo sites. So I imagine they want you to single box. So as a single boxer, I would have to shoot trigs to get the filaments, then use them, and then shoot Edencom so I can move around Stargates again within this area of space. Like it just, I don't know.
All right,
I guess it depends on the magnitude of the standings gains
I'm of
that
the
you
opinion
would get from these rats.
That we're not done seeing the changes that are related to this yet.
No,
hear me out for a
this
second.
can't be the end.
We've had one day of gates going haywire all across New Eden. We've had day 2 of now a new region of space and some very new interesting changes. And if we've learned anything about the Triglavians, is that triangles have 3 points and 3 sides. I think that tomorrow there's going to be some more changes. I think that these changes occur in 3s.
I disagree, because we are already in phase 3 of the content. Like, this is the zenith. If you've been reading the emails, like phase 1 was, I don't even remember, and then phase 2 was the Abyssal invasion. Oh no, phase 1 was the original Triglavian invasion content, where systems weren't being conquered initially.
It was the first filaments and the rest of the stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah. Then phase 2 began with Varavos, where we first saw the Sunbeam and systems actually turning to nullsec, and now this is phase 3.
Changes.
So I think we've hit our third point of the triangle. Whether they put further smaller scale changes in later on is yet to be seen. But I think the reason that we saw things today and we saw things yesterday as well is because Tuesday is the patch day. I think every patch for the last 10 years has gone out on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And they wanted to do some fun live event to prelude to the patch day, which is what happened yesterday. So that would be my guess. As far as new things happening in the area of space, this would be a really good opportunity for some events and to have some sort of storyline and have a conclusion to the Trig story, instead of just being like, okay, Trigs win, they have their area of space, move on to the next thing.
I mean, I feel like this would be a perfect time for them to literally run events where you can get a whole bunch of Triglavian rep. So to say to people, if you want to come do this content, here's a bunch of stuff popping up in your agency or whatever. You fly here, shoot some Edencom guys, you get a bunch of rep. Fantastic. In you go. Have some fun.
I'm not going to do it now because this aerospace is going to be busy as hell, but in a few weeks I definitely see myself going here and shooting some drifters and sleepers and just getting myself to positive trick standing and hopefully not affecting my Eden comp standing. I hope that's how it works.
No, it affects one or the other. If you get positive trick standing, you get negative Eden comp standing, I'm pretty sure.
I've been told, well, drifters are enemies to both Eden comp and Triglavian. So I've been told that if you shoot drifters and sleepers, we've already tested in wormholes, because somebody told me this and I was like, okay, I'm going to, and then I went and found somebody who'd run a site in a wormhole today, and he said he didn't get any standings from wormhole space, but it doesn't rule out getting standings from these new rats that only appear in trick space. So that
makes sense.
That's worth testing. I definitely want to test that myself at some point.
Anyways, this has been a crazy day.
Yeah.
So much to take.
Wait, are we running out of time already?
No, we can keep going, I guess. I don't know what.
Okay, good, because we really haven't talked about what the most important change that's come in this patch, and I can't believe we've left it this long.
Oh Lord,
the font change.
The font, yeah.
See,
I
think it looks really nice. I think it looks nice. I think it's nice and clear and readable. You know, I got no problems with it.
My issue with it is when text is bold and it just looks unclear, and I need to squint a little bit to make out some numbers. And I don't want to increase font size because, like, screen real estate is already pretty tight for me. I'm on a 1080p screen. Like, I don't want to lose more space with like D-scan and probe scan and all this other stuff that I need to have up. So I don't want to make the font bigger. And go ahead.
I was going to say I'm in 1440p, and it looks absolutely cracking. But I do have a lot more kind of real estate to play with. I've found like. I feel like if it was a bit more squished up, it would.
Have you changed your font size since you logged in?
I did. I actually bumped up the font size a couple.
Oh, okay.
14.
I will say.
No, I mean today, because
literally this morning. Yeah.
I didn't think font sizes were a thing anymore. I thought it was just small, medium, and large. I didn't think there were numbers anymore.
If you go to channel settings, you can everywhere from 27 to 9.
I could have sworn there used to be a drop-down box in settings where you would. Have you messed with the drop-down box in settings?
Yeah, let's have a look.
Because the drop-down box in.
At least one point.
Font size small, medium, large.
Yeah, so small is reminiscent of what we used to have, except it's less clear. That's what I switched it back to, because I guess I should just switch up to medium and deal with the consequences, because small is really not clear enough. Like, it's not good. I don't know. It's Now
I'm just messing with font settings and getting distracted.
Yeah, it's not something that I think is worth complaining too hard about. I just think, I don't know, it's just something CCP Design decided to do, and nobody can convince them otherwise. Kind of like the red dot. And considering the disaster that was the initial implementation of the red dot, I'm gonna take solace in the fact that they're improving with their weird UI changes. That this one is not as bad, and it actually the large font size affects a lot more things than the old settings did, and as a consequence, is better for people with worse eyesight than me. So I'm gonna take solace if there's more positives than negatives.
I had a really hard time telling the difference between 6s and 8s, and I don't have that today. So
okay, well there you go. So it's definitely, like, even as someone who doesn't like it that much, I don't think it's worth complaining about. It's not that bad. We'll all get used to it.
Yeah.
But one thing we've not talked about, I don't really want to go into it too much, is all these ore changes.
That got applied today as well, didn't it? Because there's so much stuff.
Yeah, like, I don't want to talk.
My brain is still workshopping the whole Triglavian thing. Because I'm wondering if it's like, I want us to not move off this just for a second, which is
go for it.
Like, if I'm just thinking, if a reasonable size entity decides to move in there and just make that their space, as has happened with Thera previously, where my brain's gone blank, but Thera has been kind of essentially kind of owned by groups in the past who've just moved in there and kind of be quite hostile. If something similar was to happen here, so like, and again, this is kind of in the wild speculation front, because of the way the mineral changes have just happened, you have a bunch of high sec and high and low, right? There's no null.
High sec and low sec systems.
Yeah.
It is, as I said earlier, and I'll just remind you, there are completely new ore types exclusive to Triglavian space. So I don't know if ore is even comparable to normal high sec and low sec systems.
All right,
They've added a bunch of new ore.
yeah, if there is exclusive ores that only come from there, does it not make it worthwhile to be, if you're the only guys controlling that, that would appear to give you a huge financial advantage in in a way that you can't do when you're talking about the ore split that's just happened today between high, low, and null. There are now exclusive ones that you're not going to find in other places, right? But it's impossible to say one entity is going to just hold all of high sec or all of low sec or all of null sec. It's not going to happen. No one's going to get complete control. Whereas here, if you can have complete control by holding these, what did we say, 27 systems, was it? Something like that? Which is not a crazy number of systems, given the size of some of the entities out there. I mean, this gives you a huge opportunity for monopolizing a market, right?
So
am I crazy?
I don't think we're going to see big groups move in and monopolize it. We might see coalitions of smaller groups move in, like sort of the 40 to 50 man scale groups move in, but we're not going to see big groups. And I'll tell you why. And this is the smartest, best thing that CCP have done here with these changes. By limiting the ways in and out to these 25-man filaments and to 1 bil mass wormholes, they've severely limited the size of corporations that can operate out of these areas of space. I take my corp as an example. Hard Knocks has about 100 real people in it, which is not a big corp in EVE standard. It's a big corp for wormhole space standards, but in EVE standard, it's sort of the lower end of medium scale. I would not take us to live in this area of space because we're too big, because a 50-man T3 fleet can't fit through one of these 1 bil wormholes both ways. We can only take 25 people at a time out of these filaments. It really, unless you're going to live in PvP and PvE exclusively in this area of space and never go anywhere else with your group, you're really limited to how big a group you can have and to be functional in this area of space.
Yeah,
that's it's a really good thing about what they've done here. So I think if there's ever going to be a monopoly, the most likely thing that's going to happen is something akin to the Curious Fight Club or something akin to the loose wormhole coalitions you get where nobody's blue to each other, but they're not working to evict each other, and they will team up together to push out a hostile entity. But in their off time, they will skirmish each other and fight in this area of space. I think
that's kind of the scenario you described earlier, which I actually think would sound. It does sound a lot more fun than the one I pictured in my head. Which is that if the value, I guess for me, it depends on if the value of the stuff that's coming out of there is enough to make a large enough player group say we want to completely take this. So it's like, I guess again, this is going to time will tell with this until we really fully understand what these systems are worth.
At the end of the day, no jump raiders. So moving large scales of all sort of the scales that a large alliance would mine is not really viable. It's definitely content aimed at the smaller scale. And I think in practice, if this small conglomerate of groups that I'm describing does emerge, it is going to be, in a sense, a monopoly because they're all going to be quietly PvEing. You might even see a Fight Club scenario where these groups agree with each other that they're not going to kill each other in a certain system. Like maybe you have 3 big groups, one of them controls each constellation, and they all agree, okay, this one system in each constellation in the home region, we're not allowed to kill our PvE ships in, and everything else is fair game. Those sorts of agreements might even happen to the point that people on the outside looking in would complain about it being a monopoly and complain about them all being blue to each other and being cowards.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely good value there for people who are. I mean, it makes it feel really exciting. Honestly, I'm loving that we're gaming this out because this actually seems like a really cool opportunity for some small gang guys to get in there and seize a little bit of this frontier.
I'm really happy for the people who visit who A, already engage in non-sec static content or Thera content, and B, don't visit Kaisek enough that they would care about the standings losses. I think those people are going to have a whale of a time. I'm also going to say, for the record, because we've not mentioned it yet, I heard a rumor that there is going to be there's going to be a bonus to reprocessing somehow through this new content. I don't know whether that's through standings in these stations or whether there's new skills or something, but I've heard somebody say that there was some sort of that you're going to be able to reprocess past the current limit by engaging in this content somehow, which is pretty big news if it's true. I don't know whether that's true. I'd love to. Somebody will ping me when this. Yeah, somebody will ping me.
I wonder how many of these things are linked to standing. Yeah, I will be really curious to see in a week how fucking wildly wrong we were on so much of this stuff.
I think it's going to go either one of two ways. It's either going to go a bunch of small groups live in there and there's going to be chaos for a few weeks and then it's going to settle in a way that I've described. I think that's really likely. And the other most likely scenario is very poor engagement because of the standings issues. I think those are the two most likely scenarios here. I don't think we're going to see a big coalition move in. I don't think we're going to see like the Chinese or the Russian renters move in and take over in the manner that they took over drones. But yeah,
right. Well, yeah. Hopefully it goes the fun way.
It's no super umbrella. I don't see him doing it. Like,
I mean, it would definitely it would require an awful lot of commitment, which is like why I say I feel like the intrinsic value of these systems is going to determine quite a lot. Like if the stuff coming out of here is too valuable, then it's going to be worth someone putting a lot of effort into having that.
Well, you
it's
say
like
that,
if it's relatively well balanced, then sure.
If we take C6 space, which as somebody who owns a C6, I will admit that the income that comes out of a C6 is closer to OP than it is to underpowered. Like these systems are very valuable, and there's not a huge amount.
If properly utilized, I think should be a little asterisk there. Yeah.
There's not a huge amount that goes into monopolizing them. Like the group that like sort of the Blue Troll coalition that controls the majority of C6 space right now is less than 200 people strong. Like it's not a huge coalition of blobby players, and the reason that such a small group can control it is because even though these systems are high value, it's not scalable enough that it's worth the time of a huge nullsec block to come in and push us out. And I think the same is going to apply here, because I'm looking at these systems. I'm looking at the very clever limits that CCP have put on people moving in and out of these systems. I'm looking at the supply of filament. Like even if you were to move in a large scale group and they were mass moving minerals in and out using filaments, what's the supply of filaments going to look like in a few weeks if so many people are using them by DSTing minerals around? Like there's so many little ways that the operation of large groups in the space has been hindered.
Would require way too much effort essentially for what you could get out of it for a big group. But for a small group, it's already kind of set up for those sizes.
I think criticism aside, they've done a really good job there and gating the content to smaller groups. I really think that this is one of the best groups they've done. One of the best changes they've made for small groups since they first added Triglavian ships. I would say that if not for the standings thing. I think the standings thing is just that one little detail just rains on this entire parade and kind of ruins the content for me and for a lot of other people.
That bit needs to fuck off a bit, and
it really does.
It just even if it was like slightly more interesting, I think I could be all right with it, if it was, do some missions for them or something like that, like just anything that isn't just kill a ship and wait 5 minutes and repeat in that horrible kind of PvE sense that this game has. So yeah, again, just the idea of linking it to PvE in a game where PvE is so not their forte just seems like a mistake, as we've covered extensively.
Make Triglavians drop tags and let me buy the tags of other players and trade them in for Trig standings. Make Edencom drop tags that I can trade into Trig for standings, so I can just spend however many hundreds of mil per alt on the market and just get it done with, and I don't have to engage in the content that I've already designed my entire playstyle around actively avoiding.
I agree. I think we got to wrap it up there, though.
Yeah, I know. I realize we've gone way over time already.
I think we covered the important stuff. I don't really want to talk about the org changes. Everyone else is going to talk about the org changes. Who even cares at this point? Go listen to another podcast if you want to hear about the org changes.
Thank you for being on, Laura, at short notice. I know this has been an exciting day for everyone, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to come talk to us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Varg, thank you for being here. And to all the listeners out there, I hope you join the Discord and give me all the information you have on everything you discovered, because we all want to know what's happening, and the only way to know is for us to figure it out right now, it seems. So go figure that shit out. Let me know. And fly sideways. There you go. See ya.